In the heart of a bustling Kenyan city, where life pulsed in every street corner and market square, there lived a young waitress named Wanjiku. Her charm was magnetic, her smile the kind that lingered in your mind long after she had served your table. Each day, she moved gracefully through the restaurant where she worked, her kind words and flawless service earning her the admiration of customers. It wasn't just her dedication that drew people to her. Wanjiku's tip jar filled quicker than most. On good days, she earned more from tips alone than many did in a week. To onlookers, she seemed content, her life a small but steady flame of happiness. But within Wanjiku burned a restless hunger. The small comforts of her life felt like crumbs to a soul that longed for the whole loaf. Among her regulars was a man whose presence demanded attention, Mzee Baraka. His crisp suits, polished shoes, and gleaming gold wristwatch seemed to hold secrets Wanjiku desperately wanted to know. Whenever he parked his sleek car outside the restaurant, people whispered. Was he a businessman? A tycoon? Wanjiku couldn't resist wondering how he had climbed to such heights. One evening, as the restaurant's usual chatter ebbed, Wanjiku approached him. She hesitated, her fingers gripping her notepad tightly. Mzee Baraka, she began softly, her voice betraying her nerves, you seem to have it all. Please, if it's not too bold, how did you achieve such wealth? The man looked up from his meal, his sharp eyes locking onto hers. A small, knowing smile curled his lips. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers on the table as if measuring her worth. Success, he said, his voice smooth and deliberate, isn't handed out freely. It's earned, or rather, taken. But the road isn't for the faint-hearted. Wanjiku's curiosity flared. I'm willing to work for it, she said quickly. Baraka's smile deepened. Meet me tomorrow at dusk. If you're serious, I'll take you to someone who can help. The next evening, Baraka led her to the outskirts of the city. The compound they entered was shrouded in a mysterious air, the scent of burning incense heavy in the air. Inside, a man dressed in flowing robes sat cross-legged, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling wisdom. So, the spiritualist said, his voice low and melodic, you seek riches. I do, Wanjiku replied, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. The spiritualist nodded, his gaze piercing. Wealth beyond measure is yours, but only if you're willing to sacrifice. Wanjiku frowned. What kind of sacrifice? He smiled faintly, as if amused by her question. The gift of night. From this day forward, sleep will abandon you. Your days will shine with riches, but your nights will be endless. For a moment, Wanjiku hesitated. The thought of never resting unsettled her, but the visions of wealth, mansions, cars, designer clothes, overwhelmed her caution. She took a deep breath and said, I accept. In any case, there was no turning back from here on, either Wanjiku proceeds or returns home mad. The deed was done. From that night on, Wanjiku's life transformed. Her once modest room became a palace of extravagance. Gold necklaces dripped from her dresser, silk dresses hung in her wardrobe, and stacks of money lined her shelves. Friends and strangers alike marveled at her meteoric rise. But when night fell, her newfound happiness unraveled. Sleep became a memory she could no longer touch. Each time she closed her eyes, they snapped open moments later, her mind restless, her body trapped in a cycle of exhaustion. She paced her lavish home under the moonlight, her wealth gleaming mockingly in the darkness. Weeks turned into months, and the toll of sleepless nights began to show. Wanjiku's vibrant smile faded, her once bright eyes dulled by exhaustion. She stared at her reflection, a shadow of the woman she had been. "What is the use of gold," she whispered to herself, "if it cannot buy me peace?" Desperate for salvation, she sought out Baraka at the restaurant where their journey had begun. Her hands trembled as she pleaded, "Mzee Baraka, please. Take it all back. I don't want the riches anymore. Just let me sleep." Baraka's expression softened, but his voice was as unyielding as the curse itself. "You asked for wealth, Wanjiku, and you received it. Some choices, once made, cannot be undone." Tears streamed down her face. "I'll give it all away. I'll start over." Baraka sighed. "True wealth isn't in possessions but in peace of mind. Remember that if you ever find it again." With those words, he walked away, leaving her with the weight of her irreversible fate. Determined to break the curse, Wanjiku fled the city, hoping that her return to the village would somehow restore balance to her life. The hustle and bustle of the city had never felt as empty as it did now. She longed for the simplicity she had left behind, for the quiet fields and the familiar faces of her youth. Back in the village, she hoped that shedding her riches would bring the restfulness she so desperately craved. She gave away the gold, the jewels, the fine clothes, returning to the life she once knew, humble, modest, but with the hope that peace would follow. But sleep never came. In the village, Wanjiku kept her suffering hidden. The villagers noticed her frailty, but they believed it was a reaction to the loss of her fortune. They didn't see the true extent of her torment, the sleepless nights that never ended, the restless pacing through the quiet streets. No one understood that her exhaustion was more than physical. It was a hunger for peace, a need for rest that no amount of wealth, no matter how hard she worked, could fulfill. Each night, she wandered alone, staring at the stars, praying for sleep to come. She walked to the river, its gentle flow mocking her inability to find rest, and as the moon rose, her eyes stayed wide open, her mind racing with thoughts of what she had lost. By day, she would hide in her modest home, barely able to lift her head from the exhaustion, only to rise again the moment the sun set, trapped in the endless cycle. One morning, after another sleepless night spent by the river, Wanjiku's body gave way. She collapsed, her heart too tired to continue, her mind too worn to bear the weight of her choices. Her frail form was found in the morning light, lifeless by the water she had once gazed at for comfort. The villagers gathered, confused by her death, but unaware of the real reason behind it. Her story was passed quietly, almost as an afterthought, to the few who had known her in the city. They spoke in hushed tones of the curse that had consumed her. And as her tale spread, it became a warning whispered between generations, that the price of greed is high, and sometimes it costs not just your wealth, but your soul.